Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this March 21st, a Wednesday, 2018 day on our calendar. And I'm having more fun than a person should be allowed in a lifetime covering this story about the Jesuits and the Vatican and bringing it to you almost every day, 5 days a week on FirstAmendmentRadio.com, where you can get shows of mine going back a lot of years. You can go to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com, get shows going back over 12 years regarding the Vatican-led New World Order. Now, what's going on with the Vatican-led New World Order today? Well, if you're in Austin, Texas, or Round Rock, Texas, I have familiarity with that area. Bombs are going off in packages delivered to your doorfront, or delivered to Goodwill, or delivered to FedEx. And this had been going on for, what was it now, 2 weeks, and there were 8 or 9 packages, explosions during that time, and I think there was a couple deaths, a lot of some injuries, and the police mounted a manhunt. And guess what? I woke up this morning and heard on Fox News that the police had surrounded the suspect, a 24-year-old native of Round Rock, Texas. I know Round Rock. I used to work there for the Republic Broadcasting Network, who had a studio in Round Rock. So I know it quite well. Nice little city. In fact, there's the Texas Rangers, I believe, have their, or the Houston, no, I think it's the Texas Rangers or the Astros, have their AAA club in Round Rock. And I lived on a nice little farm area about 5-6 miles from there. So I know the area, peaceful, very beautiful. And supposedly this 24-year-old kid, they made a point to say he was homeschooled, was in his car, and the police had finally surrounded him. And guess what? He blew himself up. So he's dead. You don't see any pictures of that anywhere. You know, back in the old days, if you're not used to being a newspaper reporter, and let's say you got the police beat, what's the first thing you get when you're a newspaper reporter? What they give you if you're covering the police? They give you a police radio. And I was a police reporter for 6 months. And I used to have to take that thing home with me. And so I can remember nights listening, and all of a sudden a big fire, police are on their way. I'm at the scene, right? Because I'm following that. So I'm sure there must have been a lot of police activity on their radios. And wouldn't there be a reporter who would have that police radio and follow those guys? You do it because you want to get the truth behind what these guys are doing. How did they handle the arrest? And get it in the newspaper before any other scoop can get it. Anybody else gets the scoop. And so if you're a police reporter, that police radio is important. So I would think that on a story like this, there'd be a lot of investigative reporters on it. They'd have their police radios, and they would be following the police, and they could be 50 yards away, hiding somewhere, and they would catch that explosion. Either on now with a camera, you can catch it on a video. Back then we had cameras. And so I remember one time there was a car explosion on a freeway accident that happened that I got up at 2 a.m. to go. It was outside of Naples, Florida. And I had to get up, and I got there just in the right time and flashed a couple of pictures of a man running out of his car burning. And that was in the newspaper. So what I'm getting at is if this really did happen, there's a really good chance that there should be pictures of the explosion and not pictures taken by the police. If there wasn't, maybe they set off an explosion. But where's the kid? Where is all the follow-up on where they took him? I really don't understand people today And when I heard that, I kind of snickered and I said, oh, there they go again. Always killing the suspects so they can cover up that they really did this. And I mean CIA covert operatives creating this fear and paranoia in the American population. So people say, well, that's impossible. The police, there's so many people they can get away with. How can they get away with that? Well, if they can get away with 9/11, folks, don't you think they can get away with something like this? If they can get away with going to the moon, then can't they get away with this? And if they get away with the alien false narrative they're pushing all over the place, don't you think they can get away with a smaller false flag operation like this? Don't you think they could get away with Sandy Hook, with the recent Parkland shootings and all these school shootings going on? Yeah, of course. It's terrorism, and it's terrorism funded by your own government, using every possible, the inside people at the CIA, FBI, the bought and paid off Round Rock Police, Austin Police, etc., etc. And then there's the unwilling people, that really actually believe, that are investigating this, actually believe that this kid did it on his own or with some help from some other kids. And they're always kept away from it as well. And there's an inner circle of people that control this. We've talked about it many times, how it can work. And what has it caused? It's caused people in Austin to fear getting a package from anybody. My only thought is, I thought they would do this around Christmas time. Then, oh boy, would that have been a stir. But they did say this, that they're not sure if the kid placed other packages out there to explode before they killed him. So, people are worried about any package that comes to their house, right? Now, the reason why people in America now will be worried about packages is because of what they call copycat people. They'll say on the news, well, this is a copycat situation, and this could happen anywhere, in Chicago, in L.A. And what do we have? We have terrorism in the form, they'll call it domestic terrorism now, and all it's going to do is incite fear as well as crack down on your First, Second Amendment rights, your rights of your Fourth Amendment rights of search and seizure. Any way they can get to you and rip away your rights, they will do it. And it'll always make people suspicious of their neighbor. People ask me, when I live in foreign countries, why do Americans don't talk to each other as much? And I say, well, it depends on where you live. If you live in Bronx or in Brooklyn, it's not as much different than living in Rome. But if you live in a lot of places in America, I found L.A. to be that way. You can walk on a street in L.A., never, ever talk to anybody. People are afraid to talk to people. You look at your neighbor and you go, wow, that guy could kill me. But anyway, let's go back to the roots of terrorism from my personal perspective, because today I want to talk about how the Jesuits do control radical terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, how they work together with the West and with all leaders of countries, rebel groups, using money to spread this kind of terrorism. Well, my experience goes back, and I've talked about this before, but this is a good time to talk about it because it enlightened me to really what's going on. And I doubt if I would take this approach so seriously now and say these things unless I had a personal experience with this. And couple that with a lot of good research that people do on this subject. And what do you have? You have statements that I'm making that sound to the normal average Joe American, wow, he's off his rocker. But really what they are based on an experience I had, and two, based on the sound research of a lot of people who have looked into the advent of domestic terrorism or foreign terrorism in American soil ever since 9/11, how it's escalated, how it never seems to end. The more they call for an end to this, the more they spend money on it, the bigger it gets. And that's how you feed this system that we're under. You feed it with fear, then you feed it with more money to solve it, and the problem always gets worse. Just think about the war on drugs over the years, since the 60s. The more drugs they bring into a country, the more money is spent to stop those people from bringing in. But when you find out that the people that are bringing it in are actually those who are trying to stop it, you start wondering, it does make sense. Because if they really were serious about a war on drugs, they could stop it. But why does it constantly get worse? So the war on terrorism is the same thing. Ever since it started, it's getting worse. So when did it start? Well, we could go back a long, long time and document many things that happened in times before you would really, have lived. You could probably document it during the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Russian Revolution, all those revolutions that occurred around that period of time in Europe and then here in America. But that would lay ground to much speculation, so why not talk about it in your lifetime? I mean, why not start with 9/11? Act of terrorism, right? We know, if through sound research, that it didn't happen the way the government said. Now, 17, 18 years later, not many people are even talking about it anymore outside of the solid researchers that do work on it. And if you find some really good places, letsroll.org is a good one, and you can find several really legitimate researchers who have kept at it for 17 years. And you can't come away with anything but the same thing that I'm going to tell you. It was orchestrated. The CIA, a Jesuits of Rome, covertly by having CIA and U.S. military train and basically create these events. They've been working on it. They have the money. They know how to money launder. That's how it works. And the more the government of every country says we're going to fight this and put more money into it, the more money they put into it, the worse it gets. Because the actual people who are trying to stop it are getting fed all of this covert money. And it's a scenario that you have to figure out. So let's talk about it personally. For me, I go back to 1981, 82, in that period of time. And I was as dumb as a doornail when it came to these subjects. I was a journalist, so I was quite nosy. And I always had a question to ask. Not many answers in my life, but I sure had a lot of questions. And I wasn't, as I am today, a pretty good interviewer, a pretty good reader of people. And I used to really enjoy interviewing all people from all walks of life, from the paupers to the kings. And what I found was that the more questions you ask, the more you'll really understand about what's going on in the world. So back then, dumb as a doornail, first of all, I believed in the American system. I believed in it. I was a Democrat, liberal, but I never voted, but that was where my preference was. I hated conservative Republicans at the time, growing up as a kid, with all that propaganda. I was one of those people who hated the war, believed that the military complex was corrupt, and didn't understand why, though, because I didn't understand the full picture. And so I still believed in America that could function and prosper, and there was a chance to get rid of these evil people that are controlling the government, and most of them at that time, to me, were these Republicans, right? But back then, even in America, the Democrats and the Republican Party were much different than they are today. And I've explained that before, but I'll explain it again. The Democratic Party back when I grew up was a very middle-of-the-road party, always functioning to help the worker, help unions. In fact, growing up in Chicago, the Democratic Party was the party of the people. Mayor Daley, always giving jobs away, always helping and, working from the ground roots, corrupt as could be, if you really looked into them, but that was the way it was. Keep the people working, and everybody's happy. And at that time, back in those days, even before the 80s, the Republican Party in America was a very elite party, the party of business. They could care less about the people. They were the party of conservative thought, anti-abortion, anti-Roe v. Wade. When in fact, when I grew up, I was basically on the opposite side of the fence. I thought America could prosper only through liberalism, only through these. I was a social junkie in a sense. I believed that Roe v. Wade was a good law passed, even when I studied it in law school when I was young. And I was a liberal, card-carrying liberal, but never voting. But that was my preference. And most importantly, I believed in the American system. I believed you could get rid of the crooks and bring good people to Washington or the state governments, and America's system would prosper. And when it came to the spiritual side of this whole story that we talk about today, I was even dumber than a doornail. I had no idea what was going on. I grew up as a Catholic, and I grew up doing everything a good Catholic boy would do, get his confirmation, his communion, do the whole thing. And then, of course, as most Catholics would be, as you get older, you fall away from those crazy things you're doing in church. You become an atheist, or you go somewhere else. And many Catholics I knew back then were traveling to the East, trying to be Hindus and Buddhists, and etc., looking for Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the whole shot, where I took a different approach and just became a card-carrying atheist. I said, there could be no God. That's impossible. And so I had no idea what the Vatican was all about. And that's back in 1980-something. And I went to Rome thinking, wow, I believe that the Pope was good. I believe that there was a good side. I believed, of course, there were these few bad apples in the barrel in the Vatican. I didn't know they were money launderers. I didn't know they worked together with the mafia, the governments. I didn't know that the Jesuit order was a military organization designed to kill people. I knew nothing. The Vatican, when you grow up as a Catholic, you're not given a Bible to read. All you're given are catechism books, and you follow those, the idea of the church. And, I can remember, as long as I live, not understanding one thing outside of what they told me there. And so when I went to Rome, what else was I to think? I didn't even want to think about religion, did not want to think about the importance of spirituality. And I said, oh yeah, there's these crazy people that still follow Catholicism. And there's these crazy people. You see, the Vatican's calling me right now. Okay, yes, I had to field that call from the Vatican, of course. And they were telling me, Greg, that's not the truth. Please, you've been talking about us for so long. And I say, okay, well, fly me back to Rome and we'll have a sit down. But I do not want to sit under St. Ignatius Loyola's picture when I come to talk to you guys, okay? But anyway, getting back to the experience behind terrorism, and my mindset back then was basically all political. I want to get at the truth. I know there's evil people in the world, and they can be overthrown if we get the right people in office, etc., etc. Full of questions, dumb as a doornail, and when it came to spirituality, I said I was nothing more than an atheist. And in fact, in the back of my mind, I was going, wow, I'm back in Rome. Maybe I can even find out the truth of my church and become a very good Catholic again, right? So I remember when I was in that mindset, one Sunday, I walked in one of the beautiful churches in Rome, and I was sitting there on Sunday, and there were a whole bunch of Italians in there. I didn't speak the language that well, but I could get by. And we got to the point where, in a Catholic Mass, they come around with the offering basket. And as the priest told the ushers to go through the crowd, giving them, getting money, this poor street person, yelling in Italian, ran in through the church, ran up and down the aisles, yelling and screaming, "Don't give the church their money, they're rich and they steal everything. Give it to me directly. They don't help the poor. Look at me, I'm poor as I can, and I sit outside the church and not one priest will ever come by and give me anything to eat. But look at the gold they have." And I'm sitting there going, okay. And the ushers ushered him out. But his words ring true even today when you realize that most of the money that's collected through the Vatican is laundered for criminal purposes. And they get rich while the poor stay poor. And, of course, they have a few charities out there to make it look like they do stuff that actually do some good things. But on a scale of 1 to 10, their effort to help the poor is about a -1. But so here I am, either an atheist or saying maybe I can find the truth about my church. And then secondly, believing in the American system and not liking it because at the time there were Republicans coming into office, i.e. Ronald Reagan, who I said back then was the biggest crook or the biggest traitor America will ever see as a president. And little did I know, I did it for the wrong reasons because he was a Republican and I hated all Republicans. But I was actually right. I didn't even know why back then. Call it instinct. But Reagan was the first one that reinstituted diplomatic relations with the Vatican after they were pinned with the Abraham Lincoln killing, when all of our patriots back then broke off formal diplomatic relationships with the Vatican because of their involvement in killing presidents, i.e. Abraham Lincoln. And so Reagan comes in and reinstitutes those policies or the diplomatic relations with the Vatican. And the rest is history. And ironically, it was Ronald Reagan who I left America because of, and I remember why, who almost got me killed. And that's what I want to talk about in the second half hour. Just a little bit of a personal experience with regional terrorism in Italy and how I was a victim, in a sense, and how I learned put it this way, I tried to figure out, knowing my mindset right then, it wasn't easy, but I started to wonder, wow, how did they do this? And uncovered some interesting things that led me on this search my whole life since, and that is because they were funding regional, the military, the CIA, very instrumental, and they're all over Europe. And they were all over Italy at that time. Very instrumental in funding terrorism, groups like the Brigata Rossa, the Red Brigade, and other left and right-wing radical groups that were claiming all these different bombing terrorism, and they were basically practicing what they're doing worldwide now. And like I said, if I didn't have a personal experience, along with a lot of the research I've uncovered, as well as using a lot of other people's research over the years, would never have come to these conclusions that I make right now. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Hi, Greg Anthony here from the Investigative Journal, and I've never steered you wrong before when it comes to talking about the truth regarding your political and social worlds you live in. And I don't plan on steering you wrong today when I say get involved in the hemp revolution, hemp for health and wealth. I know of some of the best hemp oils on the market. If you haven't tried them, you have to. And pay attention, they're lab tested. So contact me, Greg Anthony, at gregbeacon@gmail.com. That's Greg Beacon, G-R-E-G-B like boy, E-A-C-O-N.com. And I'll hook you up with some of the best hemp products on the market. And if you want to become a sales associate and make some money selling hemp to your friends and family, do that. Contact Greg Anthony at the Investigative Journal, Greg Beacon at gmail.com, Greg Beacon at gmail.com.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back. And by the way, where did we leave off here? Okay, yeah. We're back in Rome around 82. But before I do that, let's comment a little bit about the political farce that's going on in Washington. I mean, every day I just marvel at what's going on there with Trump and his group, and how the Democratic Party has changed. And I might as well just get to it right now because I said I would. The Democratic Party 30, 40 years ago is nothing like it is today. It's morphed into a very left-wing, almost communist socialist group. And their tactics have become nothing more than what the communists used to do. And the journalism field is nothing more than, it's worse than what European countries were under when I was there in the 80s. The American journalism situation is deplorable. There's no real investigative reporting going on outside of what's in the parameter of the New World Order. They have an agenda, and if you step out of that agenda, you're killed. So American press, even on the internet, is dead. And the Democrats are no more than, they're almost a Marxist party now. And you can hear the rhetoric, which is terrible. I mean, the stuff you're hearing is geared to create chaos between half the population who believes in this kind of system of socialism and hates America, hates what it stands for. And then on the other side, you have the America First Trump people, many people in this country love this country, and they've been now relegated to fight against this kind of onslaught of socialism, left-wing nonsense. And so, as a person, if I didn't understand the big picture here, I would immediately have gravitated to the Republican Party now, who reminds me more of the Democratic Party of 40, 50 years ago. And I would have more in common with them than I do the Democrats. So there's a reversal there. There's a change. And knowing, though, that both parties are controlled and there's an invisible hand over them all directing these parties to do this for a greater goal, I put that in quotes, the greater goal of the Vatican-led New World Order, which is to lead everyone under a one-world government, one-world religion, I would probably have gravitated to being a Republican now. And I'm sure there's a lot of people, especially in the baby boomers camp like me, who would feel the same way. So that's what we are dealing with here, a complete control of the thought and mind of America, the people, their soul. I always said the Jesuits want to take your mind, body, and soul, all of it, when you're here on earth and afterwards, and give it to Satan, or give it to evil if you don't believe in Satan or God. So that's where we're at. And so what did they do here? They used terrorism as a method to get you frightened to live every day, and to make you succumb to their power. So, knowing that, how does it operate? Well, like I said, in 1982, I walked into a newspaper room. I worked as an editor for the American newspaper in Rome during this period of time. And like I've told before, I came into the office one morning. There was me and another Italian there. I was early in the morning, came in, walked through the hallway, went down through a flight of stairs, and a bomb went off about 5 to 10 seconds after I was in that hallway, and would have been sent to the land of sky blue waters if I was 10 seconds later, and would have been a casualty in that bombing. They placed 2.5 kilos of dynamite, set it off, blew up much of the American newspaper hallway in that area outside. And like I said, it was done early in the morning when only me and there was another Italian in the building at the time, underneath in the newsroom. And I wondered after that, how could that occur? Well, the press was asking the same, not really looking into it, I found, after, the Italian press was there, and they took every story. The left wing or the people who hated American newspapers would say, "Oh, finally, this is a message for Reagan," because he was coming. The reason they put the bomb in the American newspaper is because Reagan was scheduling his first visit to Rome. This was about 10 days before. 2 or 3 hours after the incident, a right or left-wing terrorist group, whose name I can't remember, claimed responsibility and said, "This is a message to the hangman Reagan and American imperialism." So now they got you thinking that this terrorist group did it. And I started thinking, how could they get in that building? I knew it well. It was secure. I mean, this is not something, and why would they do it at that time? So nothing added up to me. What it led was me to investigate, because I was almost sent to the land of sky blue waters, right? How the hell did this happen? And so I started nosing around in places that I shouldn't. And one day I was sitting in a coffee shop, I believe it was on Via Veneto, and some guy walked up to me, looked, didn't have a suit on or anything, but could have been anybody. He spoke English well, was American, and he said, "Wow, you're the guy that was in that bombing, right?" Because my picture was in the newspapers, and I was on Italian TV, etc., etc. And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Are you looking into how it occurred?" I said, "Sure am." And he said, "Yeah, I wouldn't look too close to what you're getting at, because maybe the next time you won't be as lucky. So he kind of disappeared, and I think it was an operative giving me a warning, and I researched it to a point where I came to my own judgments, knowing I couldn't get anything published, that this had to be an inside job. I did find out that the American newspaper was funded, strangely, through covert money, and that nothing added up as far as the amount of revenue that the paper brought in to the amount of money that it cost to run the newspaper and pay everybody. So it had to be covert money to keep the American name in line in Rome, just as the Herald Tribune is probably the same thing in France, etc. And so it would be easy for us, and I found that there were a lot of CIA operatives hanging around Rome during that period of time. And so they had to case the joint. They had to make a decision of there's timing involved. Okay, the timing before Reagan's assassination was good. They could pin it on that, create more hatred of America, etc., groups who love and hate America. But one thing I found out, I lived in Italy for 7 years, and I know, talking to the average Joe Italian, nobody really hated Americans. They may hate the American system, but no one there, and there were a lot who hated the Italian system, 42 governments in 43 years. But nobody really hates the American people, unless you listen to the news. So here you go. It had to be an inside job. A lot of CIA operatives around. They had to make a decision. When am I going to blow this thing up? I can blow it up in the middle of the night when nobody's there. I can do it early in the morning and only maybe kill 1 or 2 people. Or I can do it in the afternoon or the late morning when I could really kill a lot of people, because that place was scrambled. That was a lot of people going in and out of that office. And then I thought, okay, did anybody ever tell me where they put that dynamite? Well, it was concealed behind the door of the publisher's office. And I said, well, could somebody have opened the door during working hours and have seen it? And they said, no, it was pretty well. It could have been not noticed. But they didn't really know, because the whole building was in shambles. So I said, was it underneath the wall? They didn't quite know. They knew where the blast came from. So I started thinking, okay, the object here was to maybe kill 1 or 2 or nobody, make it when there's somebody there, but not to kill a whole lot of people, and maybe kill the wrong people, right? They don't want to kill, the publisher, he could have, if he knew about it, he could have stayed away that day, but that's suspicious. So they picked that time. And then I said, could this terrorist group have gotten in there? Of course, anything can happen, but the more logical choice is that they were casing the joint. They knew when to go in there. They had an authority to go in there. And they placed the bomb, and they got maximum effect out of it. And it was just another of a lot of bombs that were going off in Rome against America at the time. And also remember the Bologna bombing of the Bologna train station, where I believe they claimed 80 people were killed. And as researchers talked about it, as I looked into it, many ties were brought between the Vatican as well as CIA operatives working in Rome, Henry Kissinger involved in this whole strategy of tension, testing out terrorism so that it could blossom into what it is today. Global terrorism, or flat earth terrorism, okay, if you don't believe the earth is a globe. Now, the Jesuits, folks, control a lot of these radical terrorist groups called Al-Qaeda. And when I say control, what do I mean by that? Well, you have to have infiltrators, people that are unsuspecting, working to create these rebel groups, funnel the money certain places, and they can't do it through, military attaches going and saying, okay, here, Al-Qaeda leader, here's your money. So we've documented on this show a number of Jesuit priests involved in these activities. One with ISIS was a Father Dall'Oglio. who's still probably in Syria working with them. But Al-Qaeda is a network, if you don't know, of Muslims who are controlled, trained, and armed, funded by the Jesuits through the CIA and probably the Mossad and a number of these other intelligence agencies. I wouldn't doubt that the Russian intelligence or French or whatever worked together too. Certain operatives there. And they use Al-Qaeda, well, starting out with Al-Qaeda, because this started right after 9/11, to create unrest. They started in a targeted country like Libya. Then they caused the military to provide support to help remove leaders that have not bowed down to their authority. Now, isn't it interesting that under Gaddafi, who was a pain in the butt, I think, a little bit to Rome, Hillary Clinton and her policies were instrumental in getting rid of Gaddafi, and Libya turned into a nightmare after that. It was better under him. So you're seeing this kind of American militaries, our State Department working together with the Jesuits and the Vatican to bring everyone under Papal Rome's authority, using this kind of terrorism, Muslim, Christian fight to do that. Now, there was an ex-CIA defense contractor named Stephen Kelly, and he said this: "This is a completely fabricated enemy. The funding is completely from the United States and its allies, and for people to think that this enemy is something that needs to be attacked in Syria or Iraq is a farce, because obviously this is something that we created it. We control, and only now it has become convenient for us to attack this group as a legitimate enemy." Shortly before his untimely death, former British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook told the House of Commons this. I didn't see this on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. "The truth is, there's no Islamic army or terrorist group called Al-Qaeda, and any informed intelligence officer knows this. But there is a propaganda campaign to make the public believe in the presence of an unidentified entity representing the devil, only in order to drive the TV watcher to accept a unified international leadership for a war against terrorism. The country behind this propaganda is the U.S., and the lobbyists for the U.S. war on terrorism are only interested in making money." Osama bin Laden was used as the poster child for Al-Qaeda, remember? Terrorism until 2011, when he was supposedly killed by the U.S. military. Folks, that story is so crazy. He wasn't killed there. And even today, they usher onto Fox News the supposed Green Beret or Navy SEAL who killed Osama bin Laden. He knows he didn't. And why, if they did, why would, and the way they killed him, he could have taken him alive if and he's the one, when he works with the Bushes and the Vatican, they can't do that. Who knows what happened to him? But he wasn't killed that day, and then conveniently they dumped his body in the ocean so you don't ever get, give me a break. So he's the poster child. He was bought and paid for by the Vatican and led New World Order. And here's the problem. Some people say that he may have died in 2001 from medical issues such as kidney failure, and of course he'd have doubles. And there's a number of pictures of him stating he looked younger when he died, supposed death, than he did 15 years before that, or 10 years before that. The whole narrative, folks, was a hoax. Did you really believe that the most powerful military in the world couldn't kill him for 10 years? You just got to read Osama bin Laden hoax. Find a lot of interesting things there. So I think you're starting to get the picture of how this operates. And it's good we go over it, as many people in Austin, Texas, and Round Rock are now afraid to get a package from UPS or FedEx. So, the Jesuits now control a group of radical terrorists called ISIS. Now, I'm not going to go into the reason they use the name ISIS, but let me just give you a hint. The obelisks in Rome, the City of London, and the Vatican all are an obelisk to worship Isis. Now look up who she is. We've done many shows on it, who this ancient pagan goddess, what she's all about, why they still worship her. And then they decide, the last and final global terrorist organization we're going to create is going to be called ISIS. The Roman Catholic Church used to openly cause people they deemed as heretics, mostly the true followers of Christ, to be killed during the Dark Ages and their Inquisition. Openly, they would say this. Now the Jesuits of Rome and the Vatican do it covertly by having the CIA and Mossad and U.S. and Israeli and other military organizations train and arm ISIS rebels to carry out their Inquisition. Radical Muslim, the Vatican is also used. Not only do they have spies and Jesuit priests helping, but they're used as money launderers using the Vatican Bank. Radical Muslims are evil, to be sure of it, just as people are created by these people. They create monsters in our own country, right? But they are controlled by the Jesuits in the Vatican, as well as the mind manipulators in Rome, in the CIA, etc. And they're the earth beast of the Revelation 13. When Obama said recently that ISIS isn't Islamic, he wasn't lying. ISIS is a creation of the Jesuits of Rome to carry out their Inquisition of killing the followers of Christ. ISIS was trained and armed by the CIA and Israeli Mossad, and they were funded by Saudi Arabia. Like I said, all of these groups working together. Now, if you listen to the left wing and Obama for years, he wouldn't even mention Islamic terrorism, and now Trump is, just the opposite. So what they're doing is getting you away from the real creation, who created it, what they really are, and getting you into a war of, Obama was wrong for not identifying it as Islamic terrorism, and Trump is right because he's now calling it what it is. But in fact, they're both doing this to keep you away from the truth of what they really are. A bought and paid for organization through your CIA operatives and military and the Jesuits and Vatican of Rome. Now, the Jesuits are using them basically to overthrow the leaders of countries who have not bowed down to their authority or they're having problems with, and really don't have a Jesuit Rothschild central bank like the Federal Reserve. And that is why Syria and Iran are in the crosshairs as well. Syrian President Assad has resisted them so far. Now, as far as what we're doing here, if you're going to follow this scenario, possibility, but there's also a greater possibility that Assad works with them as well, and that's his role. So either way, does it explain why 500,000 Syrians have been killed recently? Can you believe that number? Unreal. Right before our very eyes, an inquisition going on and no one knows why. But ISIS is being used to justify U.S. assistance to help overthrow Assad, to bring our military in everywhere. Just recently, today, Trump passed, they passed their omnibus spending bill to avert a government shutdown this Friday. And they're touting how much more money we're spending on military, as well as upping military salaries, et cetera, improving our airplanes, improving our tanks, etc. Our Navy that Obama let deteriorate over the years. And so what's that all about? Are they getting ready for war? Maybe so. I guess we got to put up a good fight, don't we? They wear masks for a reason. And that's ISIS. Think about this, okay? You ever see them on TV? Yeah, they wear masks really for a reason, to hide their faces, because some are military private contractors, people from the West. This former CIA contractor shares the ISIS, that ISIS is fabricated by the U.S. Stephen Kelly did that, to justify military action against countries that are in the crosshairs, or the countries that are, we have the West fighting the East. And there's also a lot more proof that what we're talking about here has a lot of validity, at least And I always look at the best and the worst. At worst, we should have this on a table to discuss it, shouldn't we? And then have others who disagree talk logically about it, but you don't have that. This is a taboo subject for a reason. Because in the end, what they want to do is say anybody who talks like this is a domestic terrorist, fighting against the real God lovers, our countries, presidents, and Rome, who really love God, and you're nothing but a obstinate semi-terrorist, spreading all these false claims about the good people in Rome and Washington, D.C., the good people in the FBI, the good people at the top of the ladder in the State Department. Let me tell you, nothing could be farther than the truth. There's been so many years of, fake Islamic terror, and there's so many places you can go to find that information. And it's incredible. I've got a list here, as long as my arm, showing where you can go. And you're going to have to do some research yourself, because I don't have time to give you all the websites and people who are researching this. One of the leaders of ISIS is interesting to look into, see where he comes from. Then there's one I like, is the covert origins of ISIS. There's one called ISIS is a completely fabricated enemy by the U.S. ISIS exposed 100% is CIA operation. The next bin Laden is here. Don't be fooled. Good advice. So anyway, I think we're just about out of time. We are back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.